What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into the 2024 Senior Bowl. Can you believe we made it? The hype season is just around the corner. As the playoffs are starting to conclude, we're getting into the Senior Bowl. And Senior Bowl practices start the 30th, going to the 1st, and then the game is on the 3rd. So we're going to give you a full preview here on this episode of every important position: quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, and diving into kind of their fantasy impact and what they could do for their just profile and their draft capital. So let's get into the quarterbacks. Let's start on the national team, because the American team, that's a team right there. But national team, we have Sam Hartman, Notre Dame quarterback, Bo Nix, Oregon quarterback, and Michael Penix Jr. from Washington here. What in this room, what do these guys need to do? What's their narrative? What do you think the most important, question is for these guys at the Senior Bowl? What do they need to show there? Jeff, take it away on, you can pick a quarterback in that room that you really want to see what they can do.
Well, I'm already apparently tied myself to Michael Penix from some ill-timed comments earlier like a week or two ago. But I think Penix is the one that needs to prove a lot, because especially coming off that national championship performance, he needs to show that he can set his feet, that he can deliver, especially over the middle with accuracy, and that arm strength should be there, but he needs quiet feet, I think, is going to be the biggest thing that he needs to show this week, and some calm, some poise there. And because that was not evident on the national championship. The other one, I think, too, is Bo Nix. I think has a great chance. And I think Bo Nix is probably higher than what even people realize. I know Daniel Jeremiah has dropped his first mock draft, and he started to look at Bo Nix as potentially being a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. And so it really seems like Nix is the one that's positioned himself to be that third, not that fourth quarterback in the class, as that guy that can go kind of in that range like we saw Mac Jones before. And so I think that those two are really the centerpiece in general in the entire game, but I think those two have the most opportunity to improve their stock and maybe the most proof.
Yeah, Bo Nix has been getting a lot of hype lately from the national guys, especially. I know Lance Zierlein dropped some grades. Bo Nix is his QB4 QB3 ahead of Drake May. He's got Caleb, Jayden, Bo Nix, then Drake May. So we're going to start to see it, and it makes sense. There's a lot of tools within Bo Nix's game. He's got a lot of athleticism that we saw in the 2022 film that didn't necessarily pop in 2023. But I still have questions about him, and he's probably the one player that I'm most excited to watch at the Senior Bowl, because they do offer some opportunities to throw into windows, throw across the middle of the field, especially in some of those drills that they do early on in practice. That's what I need to see from Bo Nix, because I think one of the knocks is going to be that Oregon offense really took advantage of what he does well, which is he can deliver the ball accurately within a scheme that avoids the middle of the field. He didn't really throw there all that much this year. So I think that's one thing we'd like to see. I do want to mention, as we go through the Senior Bowl preview, a lot of these players are probably going to opt out of playing the game. They're there to do extra interviews. They're there to, put a practice or two on film. Hopefully all of the quarterbacks kind of stick with it through, all 3 days. And with only 3 quarterbacks, I do anticipate that maybe by the time this comes out, or, later in the week, they sometimes add a player late. I do anticipate that maybe the national team would look to add a 4th quarterback, especially if Nix or Penix decided to opt out of the actual game.
Yeah, I think for me, Penix's medicals are huge. Like, how does that look? What's going on with that knee? When you're thinking of like all the surgeries that he's had, will he get cleared there? I mean, and if you remember Carson Strong, we were just talking about him pre-show, like his medicals knocked him out. That's the reason why they looked at his medicals, and like everybody's like, oh, there's no way that he can play based on his injuries. That is, I think, the concern for him. I think Bo has a chance to really kind of solidify himself as being a first-round pick. If he does really well and he interviews well, I think the interview matters for these guys, especially that quarterback position there. These guys have a ton to prove this week. Like, I think when you're thinking of the Senior Bowl, Nix and Penix of the quarterbacks have the most to prove in the most game, but also the most to lose. Like, if they don't look well, remember Sam Howell? He went to the Senior Bowl, didn't really have a great Senior Bowl. It seemed like the interviews weren't going well. It seemed like just kind of like he didn't throw the ball very well. And then boom, next thing you know, Sam Howell falls out of that first round and just plummets down. The other guy, I guess we got to mention him. Sam Hartman's on the roster. He is is shooting for backup quarterback money. That's what Sam Hartman's goal is right there. It just, he has some throws on tape you really like. I think he does get it out quick. I think that he does have enough adequate arm strength to be a backup. So he's got to come in there and just show teams he can be a backup in there. American team, we got Carter Bradley from South Alabama, Joe Milton from Tennessee. Man, Christian's had a thing against him for years. No, I'm just kidding. Michael Pratt from Tulane, and then Spencer Rattler from South Carolina. Interesting names, not really top names. So when we're thinking of like the top move the needle type guys that Jim Nagy likes, not so much there. But you will see Jim Nagy tweeting these guys out like they're the next, Joe Montana. But what do you think here in this room, Jeff? What do we think of these four guys? Which one is intriguing to you?
Intriguing. I don't know if it's going to translate at all. I mean, Joe Milton has the opportunity to go out there and show off as the toolsiest guy that is there, period. And that is, I think, is the one thing to kind of, the situation, spending half the week in shorts and all that. I think that Joe Milton has a chance if he can show accuracy, because he certainly has the arm strength. I think he can throw it 100+ yards or something like that. And then Rattler, too, coming in as a pretty highly regarded recruit, and he put it together for moments, but then also didn't as well. And I think he's going to have a lot of questions to answer, maybe in the interview room, and kind of off the field stuff is going to have to be the conversation there with Rattler. Pratt, the athleticism is kind of stands out there, but that's something that's going to be tough to translate, I think, to a practice environment. And then Carter Bradley is going to be at the Senior Bowl too, and we're hoping for the best for Carter Bradley. Can we circle back real quick on? I do want to ask you guys. You guys are very plugged in on college football. If Bo Nix came into Auburn, as his dad Patrick Nix won the national championship, was Auburn's career leader in passing everything. He's a legend at Auburn. If Bo Nix didn't come in with that level of expectation of being his son, do you think that his career, that is just his view in general, is looked at very differently? And do you think that NFL, because I have a belief that NFL teams are smart enough to see beyond all that, whereas the media might get a little bit hung up on that?
So I think, had he come in with normal expectations, I think he would have panned out at Auburn. And so I think we're talking a completely different timeline, where Bo Nix isn't maybe an Auburn legend that goes out and beats Alabama, because with what he's put on film over the last 2 years, specifically in that Oregon scheme, I think that he had a chance to be a special SEC level quarterback. But I think those are some of the questions that he has to answer, though, because I feel like the pressure consistently got to him in those first few years at Auburn. So do you kind of see it the same way, Kevin?
Well, I think if he didn't go to Gus Malzahn, he'd been fine. But he went to a Gus Malzahn ran a team that they didn't have a quarterback at that point. Remember, he came out and played, I think it was Oregon, first game of the year. It was one of those teams, first game. It was a long time ago. Bo Nix has been in college for a long time. But it came out, it was a national televised game. I do remember that. And he was all over the place. But it was fun. It was watching him play there. They didn't set him up for success. They didn't have a quarterback there when he got there. He was supposed to be the savior of Auburn football. And to Jeff's point, it was kind of all downhill from there, right? And he didn't play terrible at Auburn. There was just, he had to do so much that he kind of led him to have really, really bad just form, just bad, just the basics. He didn't really get coached. Malzahn was always coaching for his job there. That's why I thought where he landed was great. I thought at Oregon, finally he had really a stable coaching staff and an offense. And that's probably the thing with Nix. I go back and forth with Nix, but you can't just discredit some of the national guys really liking him. So that's something to think about too in fantasy. Like, these national guys like him. I'm not an expert with quarterbacks. I'll be the first to admit, like, I've missed plenty, and I think they're hard to really kind of nail down right now. But the Senior Bowl will show that. I think the Senior Bowl is going to show that. I think he's going to crush in interview rooms, though. So I do think Bo's going to have that going for him. If he can just make all the right throws and he shows through his progressions well, doesn't make a ton of mistakes, he has probably the most to gain of this room.
Now you guys can talk about Joe Milton and Spencer Rattler. Sorry for the divergence.
Actually, I want to stay on Bo Nix for one more second. If Bo Nix would have gone to a Lincoln Riley offense, are we talking about him the same way we talk about Caleb? Because now I know that sounds crazy when it's coming out now because it's Bo Nix, and we know that Bo Nix was laughed at Auburn, but like, the tools are there, and I think I can make the argument that Bo Nix and Caleb Williams are on the same exact level when it comes to the tools that they have, the arm strength, the arm elasticity, the ability to throw off platform, the ability to run the football, all of those things. Bo Nix checks all those boxes. And so I think that's where situation matters. The team around you matters too. But the inverse of that is like Joe Milton also kind of has tools, didn't put it all together either, despite being in a quarterback friendly offense, where like that's where you can say Bo Nix did a really good job, and it was a quarterback friendly offense, but he operated the offense to the highest level. So sorry, I do want to mention Carter Bradley. We're not giving him enough credit here. Carter Bradley, good arm strength. I think he's got a lot of football under his belt, which can be seen as a positive. I think, he's a draftable quarterback. I have him graded as a guy, there's guys like Keaton Slovis and like Devin Leary and stuff like that. I would much rather Carter Bradley than those guys because I think that he's a high upside option for an NFL team. And I think being at the Senior Bowl, he's going to get in front of coaches. We mentioned pre-show Tyson Bagent was a guy that he latched onto the Bears and then he ended up starting a couple games because he played so well in preseason. I could see a similar path for Carter Bradley, except he might actually get drafted towards the end of this one.
I also think
I'm pulling for Carter Bradley too. So
yeah,
I also Carter Bradley. If you're watching the show, I feel bad. I apologize for that introduction.
I do think Spencer Rattler can be a wild card. Rattler's going to be a wild card. I mean, the guy has been all over the place. We went to Oklahoma, went to South Carolina, thought he performed well at South Carolina due to the circumstances. I thought he looked good in some games, and then against like Georgia, he never looked good. But, when you're thinking of like how he performed, how he bounced back, he has the arm. Rattler's got the arm. It's just the in between the eyes stuff is the kicker for Rattler. So again, Senior Bowl. How does he do well in those interview rooms? Does he knock someone's sock off to where he can get a third round? Someone's going to take a shot at him in that third, fourth round. I think that's what you're really looking for here. Now, to finish up the quarterbacks, I think when you were talking, I can't believe we're talking about Bo Nix so much. What is happening to us on this show? But when you brought up Bo Nix and you were talking about Caleb, which is blasphemy, I'm not going to go there. But fair. Bo Nix, what's the difference between Bo Nix and Baker Mayfield? I think is a closer comparison to like college. Like Baker, came to, with, Lincoln Riley, did his thing. When we saw that, he reminds me a lot of Bo Nix. I think there's some Bo Nix Baker tendencies there. I think Bo is less, I don't know, how do you say this? I think between the eyes a little bit better in terms of what Baker's got, that competitiveness. Bo's got competitiveness, but it's not as outworthy as he was. Like he's not slamming the Oklahoma flag and Ohio State Stadium, stuff like that. I don't think Bo would ever do that. But I do think that there's some characteristics that are like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in on that. I do. Like I said, I know that sounds a little crazy, but from a tools perspective only, I think Caleb Williams is a significantly better quarterback than Bo Nix, especially at his age. Like when you talk about, Bo Nix did it in his fifth year. My comp, I can spoil this. My comp for Bo Nix is actually like a more athletic Derek Carr. Where like I think that he can make every throw on a football field. He might not always make the best decisions, but we did see him take steps forward as as he got more comfortable with that Oregon offense. So I've seen other comparisons. I've seen the Baker one. I've seen Jalen Hurts, which I don't love because I think Bo Nix has got a much stronger arm than Jalen Hurts ever did. But he's going to be a polarizing player. I think that's one thing to note. We could see him work his way into top 10 discussions here if Jeremiah and Zerline are super in on him. So,
yeah. All right. Before we move on to wide receivers, take a moment to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with any questions, trades, or your thoughts. Is Bo Nix equal Caleb Williams? Let's see how hot topic you get down there. Just kidding, Christian. I'm not trying to get you canceled out here.
Also, be sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty, IDP, salary cap, and best ball content for less than $70 annually. Head to footballguys.com/plans to join today. And so we do have the rookie guide coming up. With that final version, you are going to need a premium subscription to get that final version. So that's kind of out there. And as well as I know Kevin has just been cranking Dynasty content, but we'll have a lot of Dynasty content this offseason for you too.
I do like how you said salary crap. Sorry, salary guys. We love you. Okay. Jeff did not mean that. All right. Don't come after us with all your numbers and spreadsheets. Salary cap info is some of the best here in fantasy. All right, let's jump over to wide receivers. Let's start with the American team. So, loaded wide receiver class in the 24 class. We kind of dived into that. We've done the mocks. We've kind of showed you guys the depth of the class. So, you're going to get to see a lot of depth of the class in the Senior Bowl. We have Xavier Legette from South Carolina, Lad McConkey from Georgia, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint from Georgia, Ainias Smith from Texas A&M, Jamari Thrash from Louisville, Johnny Wilson, the forgotten Florida State wide receiver, Jordan Whittington, Texas wide receiver, and then Jha'Quan Jackson from Tulane. There's your small school guy that everybody loves there. Pretty fun group. I like this group. A lot of different skill sets in this group. Outside slot, I think playmakers, I think glue guys like Jordan Whittington. Jordan Whittington, if you don't know who Jordan Whittington is, a Texas wide receiver, kind of plays slot, kind of plays outside, but he's like that eighth guy off the basketball bench that just waves the towel and makes good catches. Like, that's what Jordan Whittington is. I love the guy and way he plays, and he can block. This dude is just kind of that glue guy on a team. It's going to be fun watching him fit into a team if he gets drafted there. But Christian, of this group, what kind of guy is standing out to you? What guy do you think can make a big impact?
A couple, but Xavier Legette is a guy that I've been on for a little while, as I understand that the profile does not, it's not for everyone. And then a lot of people are going to say he didn't even play until his 5th year. He experienced some injuries. There were some depth chart things where he just couldn't work his way out of the field. But in his one opportunity this last year, in his 5th year, he was a special wide receiver that he's going to get knocked for route running. And there are certain times on his film where I think I agree with that. But there are also times where he shows some wiggle and he shows the ability to get open with more than just physicality. And so this is a guy where the one-on-one drills are going to be huge, because if he's dusting DBs out there, which I think is a realistic option for him in those practices, then you're going to start to see some different conversations about Xavier Legette. There's a certain wide receiver that he's in a tier with and getting compared to quite a bit. In Keon Coleman, underclassman, not going to be at the Senior Bowl. But I have Legette ahead of Coleman. So I'm excited to watch him, especially in those one-on-ones, but I'd love to see him go out, show out in the game a little bit and show that he can be one of those wide receiver 1 type guys.
I like Legette too. He's kind of his speed's more build to speed. And so on the one-on-ones on that, I think it's going to be interesting to match up there. I think Lad McConkey is the guy that can really light up guys on one-on-ones, and especially quick separation opportunities that you see in the Senior Bowl. Like, he's the guy that I think those drills that we always get tape of and beating a defensive back, I think Lad McConkey is going to be that guy to beat him quick off the line. Maybe Jamari Thrash, a little bit of that. And then Ainias Smith maybe as well. He's the type of guy that can potentially win in a phone booth, although he's a little bit better. He played running back too. I think he's a little bit better after the catch, but that is an area that I think Legette works pretty well in as well. He served as a kick returner in the past. I literally just wrote him up today, and a lot of the reason why he didn't have production before, you mentioned the depth chart instances there was a coaching change that happened at South Carolina. He was a high school quarterback that came in at 190 pounds. The coaches didn't want it up to 220. He's up to 227 now. And so, I mean, he's gained nearly 40 pounds from when he came in as a high school quarterback. And so there's a lot going on there. And so it's interesting to see. I understand concerns about the profile there. But I do, Lad, and I think Ainias Smith and maybe Thrash are the type of guys that I think are going to set up well to win in the quick game in the Senior Bowl practices.
I think Jha'Quan Jackson, someone I want to point out. If you're looking for that G5 slot guy, that's Jha'Quan Jackson. 5'11", 185. Really played in there. His yards per route run was about 2.3. So not bad. His ADOT, 11.7. Did have some big ADOT games, though. He had a bad negative ADOT game that really kind of skewed the numbers a little bit. But did have like 4 games over 14 yards for his ADOT. You like that. Drops weren't a thing either. Only had 3 drops on the year. And he looked good. And in the times that he really played, he's a little banged up throughout the year, but is explosive. So he's one of those guys. He's 5th year kid though. So I know he's older. Some guys aren't going to like that, but he could make a name for himself. Like, everybody always wants the underdog. So in these Senior Bowl types, the one-on-one drills and all that kind of stuff that you see, Jackson could be just, all he needs is one highlight to go viral. And then we're talking about Jackson from Tulane. Oh, who is this kid? What kind of offense can he fit in there? And then to your point about Ainias Smith, I like Ainias Smith because, he's a converted running back. He used to play running back for Texas A&M, and they moved him over with Isaiah Spiller being there, Devontez and those guys. And he does a lot of good things, a lot of things well. I think that the thing with him, though, is like he's got to be a little bit more nuanced as just a route runner. Like, he does good things. He can run with the ball. He's good yak because he used to be a running back. But there is route running for him. So showing that at the Senior Bowl is going to be huge because I do think with him coming back this last year, we expected more, and it just wasn't there. Like, he didn't have those games like he used to have against Alabama, some of the big-time SEC opponents in there. But a fun room, just a lot of different pieces in this room that can get you kind of excited there. Anybody else, Christian, that you want to touch on before we move over to the national team?
Oh, I mean, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint's one of my guys, I guess, just because I just haven't seen much about him. He's one of those guys that, he was part of that cog that he was one of the cogs in the Georgia machine where, when he got the ball, he was really effective. Yeah, I think he has strong hands and things like that. I talked about him a little bit on our mock draft episode, I think last week. The last thing I wanted to mention, Jha'Quan Jackson has his college quarterback throwing to him at this event as well. And so that could be a big thing if those two ended up playing in the game together. Not that the game holds more weight than practice. I would say practice is more important, but something to note that those two already have chemistry. So that could be big for Jha'Quan Jackson's prospects this year.
All right, let's jump over to the national team. Fun team on this side too. Interesting kind of profiles over here. Javon Baker from UCF, Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky, Jacob Cowing from Arizona, Taz Walker from North Carolina, Roman Wilson from Michigan. Right? Michigan. Oh, yeah, we won a national title. Brenden Rice from USC, and then Luke McCaffrey from Rice, former Nebraska standout, question mark. But I think the guy that I love in this room is Javon Baker. Like, Javon Baker is a dude. I don't think people understand that Javon Baker was really good this year. It's 84.3 receiving grade at PFF. Just his yards, 1,000 yards, 52 catches there. He's a former Alabama kid. So when we're thinking of recruiting profile, he transferred from Alabama, just a fourth-year guy, really was one of those guys that just earned targets there, had 100 last year, 85 this year. Really just a special kid. I think from just the explosiveness too, like at 6'1", 208, he's a big guy. But, when you're looking at his ADOT, 17.1 this year, big explosive. He's one of the most explosive players on that offense. Yards after catch after reception, 7.2. Like, you really like what he was able to do this year. So for me, I'm most excited about Javon Baker. I think that Baker is one of those guys that can kind of come out of this room with a lot of people don't know who he is and really elevate his draft stock. Jeff, where are you going in this room?
Malachi Corley has a lot of steam, I think, in the fantasy community already. And I think he's a guy that has a lot to lose this week in terms of where his standing is in fantasy, because I don't know that he's a separator. And so if he's not separating in practices, I think it could be a little bit of a rough week for him. Roman Wilson, you guys know I love Roman Wilson. So he played in a very, I hesitate to say archaic, because it was a very effective scheme, but I don't know, when you look at a lot of the modern spread concepts, the ability to get the ball in space, those types of things, Roman Wilson didn't have that in his offense. And so that's the guy that I think has the biggest questions to me. He came in, he was the fastest guy at the opening as a freshman, coming in as a recruit. And so he's got that top end speed. He's really built his body up. He looks like a running back, the way that now that fabled Michigan strength and training program has really done a number on him, where he came in as a 180-pound guy and he's up to 195-ish, but he's really stocky. And so I think that if he can show, he didn't get a chance to show like after the catch in screen situations or short, quick separation type, because of the way that offense was structured. He's a blocker. He's a fierce dude. And so I think that it's interesting to see, because I think he's got the physicality. I think he's got the athleticism. And so if he can show some of those ball skills in some of those quicker drills, those types of things, I think he's a guy that could be a real riser in the class. And I think the other, got to mention Jacob Cowing, I think, and Tez Walker are the other two that people have circled probably and wanting to see what they're going to do this week.
Yeah, this team is the Christian's strong takes one way or another team, where I'm lower on Corley, I'm much lower on Tez Walker, I'm lower on Brenden Rice, I'm higher on Cowing. I'm higher on Wilson. I guess I'm higher on Baker, though I don't have an official grade on him yet. But Tez Walker is the one that I really, really want to see because Jeremiah in his first mock draft had Tez Walker in the first round. And so when I watch the film from this year, I don't see that type of player, though that has been kind of, they are hearing things from scouts about, interest in Tez Walker. And so maybe I need to reevaluate. Maybe if he has a good week of practice where he's winning in those one-on-ones, he's just, to me, that's not the type of player that he is. He's not a huge separating type of player. He's one of these guys that can be a deep threat, but that's not what the Senior Bowl is highlighting. So I'm curious to see what the narrative is after the Senior Bowl ends for him. And then Cowing's my dude. I've been in on Cowing for a couple of years now. I thought he had a chance to be a day 2 pick last year. I think he wanted to go back and improve his draft stock. I don't necessarily know that he did that, but there were the games where, he took over. He was the wide receiver 1 in that offense when Tet McMillan was still there. Of course, McMillan was getting his at the moment or for most of the season, but Cowing is still one of those players, an effective slot guy. He's my Josh Downs of this year, where I think he's stronger at the catch point. I think that he can be an effective slot guy at the NFL level. So I'm excited to see him.
If you want to go watch Cowing, go watch last year's tape, not this year's tape. I thought this year that offense was very one-dimensional towards Tet, and I think that Cowing really showed out his overall skill set last year. That's why I was really, I don't want to say disappointed, but I was really disappointed that he came back to Arizona this year because I don't think he needed to. I think that he kind of showed off there. I think to your point about Walker, because I am very I don't know what to do with Tez Walker. I think for me, the things that I've highlighted that I think he struggles with, I think he can be inconsistent selling DBs on his routes. I think that he gets too tall on his routes. And I think that he really struggles to show explosiveness unless he's just going vertical. Those are the things that kind of, who else that reminds you of? Jalen Hyatt. It kind of reminds you of oh, he just goes vertical. Oh, he can do these things. I don't see his ability to kind of make guys just separation. The separation is the struggle for me with him. It's not great. And so I think that's the concern. And he's not as athletically gifted as I'm worried about Keon Coleman too. But Keon Coleman's pretty athletic. When you're looking at that, I think that he's more athletic than Walker is. So what is that profile going to look like? Is he going to be able to show out in that room? But yeah, I mean, this group is interesting. It's a weird group. It's a hodgepodge of profiles in this group here. With especially with 4-year guys, 5th-year guys. Brendan Rice, had an up and down, career. But at USC, some people kind of like him there. Any love for our guy Luke McCaffrey at Rice? Any love for him?
No.
I see some buzz out there. No, I said XFL, but I don't want to be mean.
Yeah, I'm pretty out on him. I think he does some things well, but depth piece, wide receiver 5-6 type of guy, I think is probably the upside. I think this might get him drafted. His name might also get him drafted, but I hope he has a good week. I hope he has a really successful week and he becomes an NFL player. That's what I hope.
Yeah. Anything else? Any takeaways left, Jeff, with the wide receiver room?
I think it's an interesting group. It's obviously we're missing the top tier of these guys. I mean, everybody knows Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, and I think Troy Franklin is probably arguably in there as well. And Keon Coleman's not going to be there. So there's a lot of top or end guys that aren't going to be there. And so I think we've seen kind of back and forth a little bit on the Senior Bowl on who's there and who's not. There's definitely some talent there that I think is the biggest thing. And I think there's a lot of guys with things to prove. And we've seen this. I mean, Puka Nacua last year was the Senior Bowl and he was a springboard, and we saw that go there. And we talked in pre-show, Jonathan Mingo was the guy that wasn't really high on radars, and he ended up being a 2nd-round pick. And so I think some of these guys that have the ability to show up this week and to really, those measurables are there, they're able to win in practices and those types of things. People can improve their stock.
All right, let's call our shots before we get off of YouTube here. Christian, give me the one wide receiver you think is going to have the best week that you feel like is going to increase his draft stock the most.
Lad McConkey.
Jeff, where are you going?
Roman Wilson.
Oh, look at you. I'm so glad you graduated to Michigan Love. I appreciate you. I get you a sweatshirt. I'm gonna go Javon Baker. I'm gonna stick with my Javon Baker UCF kid. And we'll see. We'll see how that kind of plays out with the Senior Bowl. See if these guys can go there.
Yep. And the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you head over there, search up Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, leave a review if you are feeling inclined, 4, 5-star preferably, but make sure you head over to your favorite podcast app and catch us there.